From when I recorded this video, Alice is due to be released in 12 hours. Since I've got most of the footage I needed, I decided to try out the M2P1 Alice, M2P1 Jane, and M2P1 Yuzuha comp, as it's been the talk of town, both on how strong it is, as well as a big controversy where the original uploader that showed off its power level came out as having secretly used M2P5 instead of M2P1. At the very least, it got the community scurrying to try it out, and sure enough, I can very easily get a 65-second kill of Miasmic Priest with it. If optimized, it could be under 60. So let's have a brief look at how overpowered this team is. This was using Alice's signature on Jane instead of Jane's own signature. In calcs, there's some debate on whether Jane's or Alice's is better, but with my relative lack of time, even if Jane's ends up being better, I'll pass on having to work my rotation around maintaining predatory instinct stacks, thank you very much. Either way, this is effectively a 12-cost team killing Miasmic Fiend in a minute. That's what other M6 teams do in their own content. If the rotation is actually optimized, they should hit under 60 seconds without much trouble. So instead of me taking up a fat slot on the Alice guide, let's take this video to talk a little bit about Alice's Mindscapes and why they're pretty bad in isolation, but absurdly strong when in the right context. Some characters' Mindscapes can fundamentally alter their rotations. M1 Yuan can be played as a true on-fielder. A lighter M1 allows Evelyn teams to hit 7 chains in one stun. And Miyabi M2 means you don't have to deal with one Fallen Frost missing stacks in the out of stun period. Heck, Yishuan's just come out and she gets a brand new move at M2 and a stun extension that changes her combo routing. Alice has none of that. Her Mindscapes are just stat sticks, and in isolation, they're not all that amazing compared to other characters. But when you couple them with buffs, like Artful, as well as other characters and their Mindscapes, such as Nicole's School Passive, Jane's M2, or Yuzuha's M2, you get some pretty ridiculous numbers. Alice M1 offers a nice, but in practice somewhat negligible 25 blade etiquette whenever Polarizer Sword is triggered. Considering that her additional ability already provides 30 blade etiquette whenever any disorder occurs, even those from other characters' abilities, like Energy, getting 25 blade etiquette limited specifically to her charge basic 3 use can help with certain thresholds and combos, but overall is a minimal gain. Given that Alice can easily disorder other anomalies as well as herself, the generation she'd be getting from her core passive's 10 blade etiquette on Assault, in addition to those from disorders, dwarfs the infrequent gain from polarized assaults. The 20% death shred on Assault though is a big factor. especially as Death Shred gets stronger the more you have of it. By itself, this should be, what, a 12% damage gain? Strong, but it shouldn't be getting 60-second kills. Here's the thing. As Alice's shield buff is artful, providing up to 35% Death Shred, and one of her best teammates is Nicole, who alone provides 40% Death Shred, this Mindscape can lead to a 95% Death Shred value on enemies with the right setup. Let's do a very short crash course on this. I'll refer to so stable on pen ratio since, unless we're dealing with specific modifiers like miasma, it's comparable to Death Shred. The difference between 0 to 5% in Death Shred is around 2.85% in damage. 90 to 95% though is a 5.66% increase. That doesn't sound like much, it's not even double. But this gets more impressive when you look at it in terms of absolute numbers. 0 to 5% in Death Shred would take 1000 damage and turn that to 1028. That same 1000 going from 90 to 95% Death Shred is taking 1965 damage and increasing that to 2076. While most stats get worse the more saturated they get, Death Shred gets better. 5% is giving you 28 damage, but 90 to 95% is giving you 111. It scales with itself, so you get more value out of it the higher you get. If we think about regular stats, things flip. A 5% physical damage bonus is taking 1000 to 1050. That 5% is a lot more than what we're getting from Death Shred at the start. But 90% and 95% in physical damage bonus is 1900 to 1950. That's a 2.6% increase? It's still a 5% increase from 1000, but proportionally it gets lower. I'm grossly simplifying things here. Damage percent doesn't really have a limit, even if each point's proportional increase is slower than the last, and defense isn't going to drop below 0. Either way, when you factor in how much extra damage each point of Death Shred is giving you, coupling Alice's M1 of Artful stacks in a Nicole team means that it isn't a 12% damage increase, it's almost 23%. Nicole and Yuzuha team running both Astral Voice and Proto Punk or Swing Jazz would have a total damage percent saturation of 179%. And that's without a physical damage D5. With one, that'd go up to 209%. To get a 23% damage increase at that level in damage percent bonuses, you'd need over 70% to be comparable. It's this absurdity that has enabled players to manage kills with Miasmic Fiend at full cost. M1P1 Alice, M6P5 Nicole, and M0P0 Yuzuha. So the context matters. Remove Artful and remove Nicole, and now Alice M1 is middling at best. But with our current boss lineup and the teams available to her, you're getting better scores out of a full limited cost team than you would be out of a full M0P1 Alice, Vivian, and Yuzuha comp. Granted, my 65-second clear was done with Jane's M2. With Artful being a thing, that's still almost an 18% increase in damage just from M1. And so that we're keeping our standards aligned, that'd be around 55% worth in damage bonuses required to match. Then you start applying that logic to Jane and her Mindscapes. We've already gone over just how difficult it is to get more damage on Saturated. Yet Jane and her M2 allow assaults to crit. Since anomalies cannot usually crit, this means that there is no saturation here to make up for. So 100% crit damage is going to be a 100% increase in total damage. So that's what? The equivalent of 309% in damage bonus being provided by one character and their Mindscape? To be fair, Jane doesn't need her M2 to allow assaults to crit. With Jane at M0P1 though, put her against Nicole's resource generation, Death Shred, and a combination of drive discs and vengeance means they're keeping up with each other. Jane, however, can offer more assaults. When you start not only getting more assaults, but those assaults do way more damage than what Nicole can contribute, like by getting 100% crit damage and 15% Death Shred from M2, in addition to having enough anomaly application to almost hit anomaly ICDs on rotation, Jane leaves Nicole in the dust. That alone isn't going to be getting 60-second kills though. You're looking more at 2-minute kills. Unless you can kill Miasmic Fiend before the invulnerability phase, runs are going to be restricted. For that, we need to look at Alice's M2. Like with M1, at first glance, it doesn't look all that impressive. Alice's ultimate triggering a polarized assault is handy, but given how ultimates are not all that frequent, it wouldn't be that significant a damage gain. In a 3-minute run at M0P1, you're getting 3, maybe 4 ultimates. It then provides a 15% increase to assault and assault disorder damage. This is quite significant given how usually anomaly and disorder damage percent are often unsaturated, but with Yuzuha's buffs and Miasmic Fiend's anomaly damage bonuses, it can still see a fair bit of saturation. The increase also only applies to assault damage and disorders triggered off assault, meaning it is rather limited. And remember that Polarity Assault cannot disorder itself, only other anomalies and regular assaults, so you don't just want to sand it plainly. but overall it's still a strong damage increase. It does give an extra 1000 decibels when entering the battlefield, which is a standard bonus seen in other Mindscapes that is often little more than a quality of life. Yet also like M1, when this is contextualized around existing fights and other characters and their Mindscapes, it gets pretty ridiculous. The 15% assault and assault disorder damage is going to apply to everything when the whole team is dealing physical damage. That 15% assault damage increase applies to Jane too. And Alice's ultimate being able to trigger a polarized assault is a big enabler for P0 teams and any low-cost players that make use of the Artful buff. With a Nicole Yuzuha team, it's still Alice that gets element matched. But at that point, especially at P0, it's difficult for the Zordas to be sustained. This would require Physical Anomaly and Polarized Assault to be continuously cycled every 10 seconds to keep up with Artful's defense shred bonus. And without element matching Nicole, it would be a struggle. In fact, the same is true for Jane teams. Rather, it's worse. Nicole at the very least can provide the odd corruption here and there, especially if built with Anomaly Mass 3d6, but Alice, Jane, and Yuzuha is mono-physical. The only disorder you're getting is coming from Alice's Charge Basic 3, which is hard capped by her resource generation. Yet M2, now Alice's ultimate, is able to provide polarized assaults, and that means it can provide the Zordas. And even with limited ultimates in a fight, this can go a long way to maintaining Artful. Of course, it also means more assaults, which, given Jane's presence in the team, means more damage from assault crits. It also means more decibels from both inflicting an attribute anomaly and getting an extra disorder, so cycling ultimates can be done even faster. If we follow the decibel line of thinking though, we arrive at the other linchpin for this team, Yuzuha's M2. The actual damage increase from Yuzuha's M2 isn't all that significant. Remember that at these levels of saturation, a measly 15% isn't adding all that much value. What she does offer though is more anomaly buildup for the team, which means more assaults, which crit, and more decibels, and more blade etiquette due to Alice's passives. I can go on. Equally as important is that she provides chain attacks, and chain attacks generate a hell of a lot of decibels. That alone isn't enough though. It's when it's coupled with everything else that it really shines. In my M0P0 Alice, M2P0 Jane, and M2P0 Yuzuha kill of Miasmic Fiend, I was getting Alice's first ultimate at around 55 to 60 on the days bar, just under 30 seconds into the fight. And the old M2P1 kill, I got it 10 seconds into the fight. And then by making use of parries, the decibels provided by the extra attribute anomaly and the Zorda triggers, and Yuzuha's M2, I got it again not even 30 seconds after that, just in time for the stun period, whereas in normal runs, it'd be misaligned. It took me 30 seconds with just Yuzuha and Jane M2 to generate 2000 decibels. In that same amount of time at M2P1, I generated 3000. Does that make sense? An ultimate every 30 seconds? With all the extra resources that Alice gets from all of these assaults, disorders, chain attacks, and ultimates, there isn't a single second in that run where I was out of blade etiquette. I barely have time to use Jane and use her resources. The synergies just keep stacking up. At first, it looks like it's just damage. Death Shred is great, so Alice M1 and Nicole or Alice M1 and Jane M2 work well. Assaults being able to crit is huge and really pumps those numbers up. But it's more than just damage. It's the extra polarity assaults from M2 ultimates helping maintain full uptime of the Artful buff. Then it's the polarity assaults and disorders that come from said ultimates fueling Alice's blade etiquette generation from her additional ability in M1. Then it's having more blade etiquette, which leads to more charge basic 3s, which leads to even more polarity assaults and disorders, which again leads to more blade etiquette for her additional ability and M1. I hope you're starting to see how this virtuous cycle goes. Now we check in Jane with extra buildup from her M1 and Yuzuha's buildup from her M2, leading to even more assaults, which leads to even more attribute anomaly decibel bonuses, not to mention even more decibels from Yuzuha's force chain attacks, which leads to faster and more frequent ultimates. Then I see extra polarity assaults and disorders that come from said ultimates. I think I've said enough. All of this plus a 1000 decibel starting bonus means that it's possible to kill Miasmic Fiend before she starts her phase transition, which is pretty wild. Now, I have to be clear, I have seen some talk about how this team can kill Pompeii faster than an M6P5 Evelyn Team. As much as I find these Mindscape synergies cool, I do have to dispel that idea. I'm a whale myself, I know how cracked that comp is. So I hopped on with whatever meme discs I had. For context, my lighter was using King of the Summit and I didn't even have him at 50% crit rate. Look, don't ask, content creator things, blabbing, my discs are all over the place. Put drive disk loadouts on the feedback form please, thank you. Even with that, I managed a 68 second kill on my first attempt. Since I didn't record that, I tried a few more, and within 5 minutes, I got 58 seconds with wholly unoptimized rotations, like using ultimate out of stun, since I thought maybe I'd need it for a second stun, but This could be 55, heck 53, maybe lower. So, no. A full M2P1 Alice Jane user team is not likely to beat out a premium M6P5 Evelyn Lighter Astra on their show content. Especially not if optimized. Maybe it stands a sliver of a chance if they're using the new CN tag to keep Pompeii locked down. I'll probably cover that in a future video, but without Fire Anomaly to interrupt it'd be difficult. Maybe using Alice's non-EX special for side swap shenanigans to alter Pompeii's attack's direction. I digress. Even if it isn't killing Pompeii in under a minute, it is still incredibly competitive, and from a cost perspective, likely the strongest single team we have in the game generally. Which is interesting because Alice's M4 and M6 just aren't all that great. M4 is somewhat decent from a statistic perspective, with 10% res shred and 25% physical anomaly buildup. Most of its power is on the res shred, given how it's a strong and diversified way of increasing damage, but the buildup bonus is nice too. Since so much of Alice's buildup is derived from anomaly mastery, the 25% gain helps diversify her further. But do keep in mind it applies only to her regular basic attacks, and not her charged basic attack. It's a small gain, but does make it easier to cycle assaults given how often enhanced P5s get used. M6, funnily enough, might be worse than M4 in practice. It is an increase in damage, but a minor one. The number seems impressive, 3,300%. But this is tied to the value of Alice's anomaly proficiency. She does carry a lot of it, and the fact every hit is guaranteed to crit helps us do more damage, but depending on your team, its contribution can lower quite a bit. As it is an instance of standard damage, this means it is not receiving any bonuses from anomaly or disorder damage percent. So what at first looks like a pretty significant amount is quickly dwarfed as buffs ramp up. When unbuffed, each tick is doing roughly 10% of an assault. I hit for 484,000 on the assault, and the M6 attacks are doing 52,000. With M2P1 Jane and Yuzuha on the team though, this drops to a measly 5%. My assault goes up to 1,360,000, and each tick of M6 is doing 74,000. But then you take it into an actual fight. With Miasmic Fiend's anomaly damage bonus ramped up, drive discs in full effect, and Artful being the darling it is, I'm hitting for almost 4,370,000 on an assault. M6? 78,000. That's 1.8%? Even with all 6 hits landing, that's just barely over 10% of a single assault. Coming into a comp that assaults every 3 seconds. Faster than that at times even. So while there might be some fun things that can be done with crit build Alice potentially becoming viable, given its locked Alice's anomaly proficiency stat for its damage limits its potential. Although I'm sure someone will find a way to make it busted. People always do. I think with that we can come to a close on our overview of Alice's Mindscapes. In summary, they're actually not that good. Not in isolation, that is. When you pair them with the right buffs, debuffs, and characters, you can take what looks like it should be a few dozen seconds in advantage and turn that to a 1-minute kill. So keep an open mind. Gacha games have their own trappings. Heck, as a whale I've fallen into them and I'm not proud of it. But if there is one thing that these kinds of games offer, is an ever-evolving cast of characters with unique interactions. Who'd have thought that little Nicole from 1.0 would be a near tier 0 character today? Or that Miyabi Sucos Mono Ice team would surpass the Shield Premium Miyanagi comp that Mihoyo was pushing? What's important is to look at characters as they come and think out of the box, because sometimes these little feedback loops between passives, mindscapes, and the content they're played in can snowball into gigantic gains. At the same time, do keep in mind that a lot of this rides on Artful being the current buff, or being able to kill Miasmic Fiend before she goes into her phase transition. Don't go down the FOMO rabbit hole, pun not intended, and go for Alice's M2 just because the power level she has. Spend responsibly. Even if you're no whale and you're just interested in Alice and the crazy things you can do with her at baseline, then rest assured, I'll be covering that too. So do like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. I've got more videos coming. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.